barakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So a lot of the points I was going to make has been made already by some of the speakers, and I've been given strict instructions, 10 minutes. So I'm going to try and pare this down as much as I can. So Islamic Human Rights Commission, we've been doing work on Islamophobia since 1997. Many of you are aware of Masood Shajari and Arzu Mirali, who lead our hate crime projects. Is this better? Yeah. All right. So they've been working on this almost 2 decades now, over 2 decades now, in fact. And our reports consistently have shown that there has been an increase in Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred throughout this time. People have spoken about, for example, the rise of the far right, and you can throw in Trump and Geert Wilders and all of this that's been happening. Our last report was for the UK was 2015. It's called Environment of Hate, the New Normal for Muslims in the UK. And one of the things that report, this was the second time we'd done this report in the UK, and one of the things it had shown was Islamophobia on every single category that we measure had increased exponentially. Some by doubling, others by 15-20%, but basically the lived experience of Muslims here in the UK was becoming worse and worse. Now, everybody talks about the far right, everyone talks about how people are getting attacked on the streets. Yes, that's all happening. People talk about the media and how that's sort of amplifying the voice. But one of the things that tends to get ignored is the role of political discourse and the role of policy and law and the legal regimes, and that tends to get less highlighted. Now, from our surveys, from our reports, and from a review of literature, policy, political discourse, what's been revealed is that the nature and level of governmental and political intervention has been highly significant to the deterioration of lived experiences and the situation for Muslims in the UK, across Europe, America, and you can throw in India and a few other countries around the world as well here. It's always been our contention at IHRC that the media, government, policy, the law, all of these combine to create an environment wherein ordinary people are affected. Muslims are routinely portrayed as less than human, as the other, as at best haters of all that is good, and in the UK context that's British values, and at worst innately or actively violent, and I think somebody's already touched on that point as well. This perception is produced by lazy media practice, political cultures that marginalize minorities here in the UK and majorities in the Muslim world. Legal regimes like the anti-terror law and policies that create fiascos like the Trojan horse hoax, as it were. It's all of these things which then filter down and create and help create the environment of hate within wider society that impacts on the day-to-day experiences of Muslims. And I think it's worth dwelling on this idea of environment of hate. When we say this, we don't mean that every Muslim experiences violent attacks as soon as they walk out of their door. Rather, it's a whole spectrum of experiences. So whether it's you sitting on a train and somebody glaring at you because you're wearing a hijab, or finding that prospective employers don't pick up your CV because your name is Muhammad or Ahmed, or having offensive remarks made by colleagues, oh, do you support ISIS, and so on. All of these are linked, and these are not aberrant behaviors that is only seen amongst far rights or sort of racist elements. This has actually become widespread across UK communities and is the result of constant demonization of Muslims by the government, by other institutions within the media, as I've sort of mentioned or touched upon already. I want to sort of give an example of a few everyday experiences of hate, which don't necessarily make it into the newspaper or onto people's social media posts. So in our last response report that I've mentioned, we had a respondent who was a midwife, and she tells how she went into the maternity ward to help a lady deliver a baby. And the woman starts shouting at her because she's wearing a hijab, while in labor, "I don't want my baby to see your terrorist face." Another case that we worked on was a gentleman whose boss asked him if the beard on his face was a loo brush. And his colleagues would constantly offer him alcohol and pork to see if they could get a reaction out of him. It is this everyday racism that has now become normal, which in turn shifts the standard of what is acceptable behavior, such that some people now feel it is okay to just spit at, swear, or even physically attack people because of their religion. Now, one of the things that has come out of the many studies IHRC and others have done is that discrimination at every level, from the politicians down to the street thugs, nobody actually cares about the type of Muslim you are. And that's, in fact, the main theme that I wish to discuss, because I was asked to discuss about how Islamophobia, whether it distinguishes between sects or not. And all of the reports essentially show this. In fact, in its most violent and virulent and most racist form, it doesn't even matter if you're Muslim or not. And I will clarify this point as I sort of go along with a few examples. Now, the reason why Islamophobes don't distinguish between different types of Muslims is manifold. So for politicians and the media, the primary reason is that these distinctions actually don't matter. They're trying to create hysteria about Islam and Muslims. Whether it is to create the new bogeyman and justify extra spending on security, or whether it's to distract from the government's failed economic policies by blaming the Muslim migrants, or whether it's Tony Blair, for example, presenting Muslims as innately violent so as to gloss over his war crimes in Iraq and justify them. Essentially, hatred of Muslims is a means to an end. It is a way of justifying or distracting people. It is in their interest to make the threat look as big as possible. So it doesn't make sense for them to say, only hate the Sunnis or only hate this section of the Sunnis. In fact, the opposite is true. It makes more sense to basically try and present all of us as one. All 3 million Muslims living here in the UK are a monolithic bloc who are a singular threat to British way of life. And so Shia, Sunni, Salafi, we are all now potential targets in order to amplify this threat that we supposedly pose to the British way of life. Secondly, for many Islamophobes, Islam is the problem. So it doesn't really matter who, so long as you are following Islam and fall within the family of Islam, it doesn't really matter which section of the Muslim family you fall into. You are the problem by virtue of following Islam. For others, hatred of Islam has now become the new culture war. Their hatred, and it's a way of masking their hatred of foreigners, of brown people who've come in. One could say these are arguably the intelligent racists. They understand that racism is no longer acceptable. So now they've repackaged it in words that are more palatable for society at large. Islam is the problem, not the brown people that they in fact hate, who they believe are coming in hordes to take their jobs. But really and truly, they hate all of us, purely because we are foreigners, and our sect, our country of origin, none of that really matters. Whether you're Shia or Sunni from Pakistan, you're still a brown person they don't like. And then there's the ordinary Muslims, the ones that we tend to focus on, whether it's the far right or the lady who gets angry at you on the bus and spits at you. He hears the politician and the media talk about Muslim terrorists and grooming gangs. He hears people talking about culture wars and the destruction of British values. He hears the Prime Minister talk about Muslims opposed to British values. He hears about how Muslims are taking jobs, how they're doing this, that, and the other. And he then synthesizes all of this information and concludes Muslims are the problem. He isn't going to take the time to understand 1400 years of Islamic history, of our jurisprudence, of our culture, of our norms and values. He doesn't really care, or he probably doesn't know that Sufis and Salafis exist, or how Muslims disagree on almost everything from when we start Ramadan to whether or not we wipe or wash our feet before Salah. Karbala and Medina are foreign-sounding words. They don't have the resources or the desire to understand Islam and the nuances of the Muslim community. So to give a few examples of these, take the issue of terrorism, anti-terror policies, laws and policies. Politicians and the media talk about the threat posed by Muslims. They don't talk about the Shia community, they don't talk about the Sunni community. Every so often the word Salafi gets thrown in to sound intelligent, but really and truly to the British public it means nothing. They present an all-encompassing threat posed by Muslims. Again, no nuances as to who these Muslims are. When these ideas are put in place and you see the policies and laws, what you see is that no distinction is made. This is why Shia youth studying in school in this country are asked if they support ISIS. This is an actual example. Police officers asking them, do you support ISIS? This is why you see police officers stopping people, whether they're coming from Karbala, Najaf, Medina, Mecca, and asking them the exact same questions. They don't care if you're Shia or Sunni. All they see is a Muslim and they're implementing the anti-terror policies. The counter-terror legislation was envisaged and framed and is implemented in a way where all of us are essentially a threat. It makes no distinction. That's at a political level. At a street level, what you see is Muslims being attacked irrespective of sex. So a Muslim woman in a hijab will get spat at. Nobody's asking if she's Shia or Sunni. She's just being attacked. When they attack sort of cultural centers, Husseinias, mosques, they leave pigs' heads outside and so on. Again, there is no nuance as to whether this is a Shia center or a Sunni center. They're just attacking it because it's a Muslim thing and they wish to attack Muslims, I guess. And at the street level, even attempts at nuance is actually lost. So a good example, and I'm going to quickly run, I know I've only got 2 minutes, but I want to quickly go through this example. So Al-Quds Day 2017, everybody saw the sort of media hype around this. Certain section of the media was presenting Al-Quds as a Shia Iranian event. The event itself is attended by people of all backgrounds. It's a very mixed, multicultural thing. But they deliberately wanted to create this idea of these guys are supporting terrorism and they are Shias. What it does is in the British public, it creates the idea that we're terrorists, and within the Muslim community, it creates a split. This got picked up by Darren Osborne. Darren Osborne then tried to attack the event. He was unable to, so he redirected and he attacked a mosque. He attacked Finsbury Park Mosque. He attacked a group of people coming out of the mosque after doing Taraweeh, a Sunni mosque. So the idea that this was a Shi'i event was completely lost on him. All he cared about was attacking the Muslim terrorists. And if he couldn't attack them at Al-Quds, he was just going to go and randomly find any others, Sunni, Shia, whatever they may be, and kill them. And so it shows that even though the media was trying to create a nuance of these guys are Shia, on the ground, in terms of the actual far right and extremists, it gets lost. They don't care. All they care about is hating on Muslims. I'm going to try and cut it short because I know I have to think. Just quickly, so how should we respond? Firstly, in fighting Islamophobia, we're not in competition with each other as NGOs. Sometimes when you see the NGOs, and we try, as IHRC try to reach out to people, people protect their ideas as though it's copyrighted commercial material. We need to stop behaving like that. We're all fighting for a common cause, which leads me to my second point, which is we need to stop sitting in our silos, working independently of each other. We need to start talking to one another and basically coordinating. Finally, our primary focus needs to be the government and institution. Yes, we need to tackle the far right and what's happening at the street level by challenging the police and so on. But the reality is that when you see the political rhetoric move to the right and becoming sort of more and more anti-Muslim, you see more and more attacks against the Muslims. So we're seeing this in France, we're seeing this in Italy, we're seeing this in Austria and in the UK. And so where you see that correlation, we need to now start sort of wisening up and saying, actually, we need to start holding the government and the media to account and saying to them, when you speak like this, you endanger our lives. And basically, we need to push back as a community. Thank you very much.